And now we're going to begin here at our Denver Cybersecurity Summit, our first panel on security orchestration and talent retention. It's going to be moderated by Kristin Judge. She is the CEO and president of the Cybercrime Support Network. Kristin and panel, take it away.
Thank you, Bradford. This is Kristin Judge, the CEO of the Cybercrime Support Network. I am so thrilled to be here with this panel today to help you all learn a little bit more. I've been learning so much working with these panelists and others through this process, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Today we're talking about security orchestration, automation, and the workforce. And I'm going to be talking to panelists from 5 amazing companies. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I work for the Cybercrime Support Network. We are a nonprofit 501c3, and we are building the national system to support cybercrime victims. We're talking about small businesses and consumers. You can check out more about us at fraudsupport.org. And all those technologists who have everybody call them when they get hacked because you have cybersecurity in your title, you can now send them to fraud support. So you're welcome. All right, let's get right into the discussion here. I'm going to start with Isaac on this one. What we try and do is have each one of you just introduce yourself, say who you are, who you work for, and what you do, and we'll just go right around in a circle here. So Isaac, if you could introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. So Isaac Hannagan, I'm a sales engineer and solution architect with ReliaQuest, based out here on the west side of the United States. I've been with ReliaQuest for a couple of years now, and really what we're doing is working with our customer base on how do you enhance visibility and ultimately drive adoption, and then kind of increase those security outcomes across not only just one tool but multiple tools, hence security orchestration today.
Great, thank you. Nathan?
All right, thanks, Kristin. I'm Nathan Wenzler. I'm the Chief Security Strategist here at Tenable. We are the creators of Nessus and the leaders in the risk-based vulnerability management space, and have been doing so for a little over 20 years here in the industry. My role is kind of a hybrid one, but I spend a lot of my time as sort of an advisory service to our executive customers about how to build their security programs, do them a little bit better, optimize for what they're trying to accomplish, and generally just help promote good security maturity for all of our customers as we go.
Thank you, Nathan. And Dan?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Dan Bearl. I'm a solutions architect with Recorded Future. We're a threat intelligence company. We collect broad range of threat intelligence sources from open web to dark web and technical sources. Kind of do some machine learning, natural language processing on that to provide context and provide that to our clients through a variety of channels. My role with the company as a solutions architect is to work with our clients and help them build out, kind of build our threat intelligence into their automated tools and workflows to get the most value out of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Rick?
Yeah, thanks. So Rick Miles, I'm a director of product management at Proofpoint, and I run the threat intelligence, threat reporting, and orchestration products for Proofpoint. In a previous life, I spent about 10 years on the other side doing operations as an officer in the U.S. Army, doing those military intelligence and cybersecurity operations.
Great, thank you. And Dave?
Hi, I'm a global advisory CISO for Duo Security, which is now part of Cisco Systems. And I spent a lot of time talking about zero trust and helping organizations get to a better place by reducing risk overall, as opposed to, being hypersensitive about various boxes that they put in. It's more about, the strategy on how you can reduce the risk, largely in part with the tools you already have in place. Great,
thank you so much. All right, we're just going to go through some questions here, and if you want to jump in and be a part of a conversation, if I haven't asked you, please jump in and let's keep it going. What type of tasks can be automated by a SOAR solution to free up the time spent on routine tasks by their security teams? And I'm going to start this one with Isaac.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very broad question, right? But I think it's really kind of an evolution, and the way I really see it, and from a company perspective, is also just looking at the lower hanging fruit, the repeatable tasks, obviously, and I think as you look at it, from security, visibility, and response perspective, really carving into all of those individual tasks as you start looking at enrichment factors, contextualization. That's really where you're going to get the most bang for your buck, so that you can really gain additional confidence in the decisions that you then want to be able to make and automate further downstream, right? I think the challenge within a lot of those those tasks is really identifying where that routine is and why that routine or why those lower hanging routines exist. So it's identification, I think, really of where you can get that bang for your buck, so that by the time you're looking at your strategy to investigate and analyze what's actually going on, you're not left running multiple investigations across multiple technologies, right? A lot of the panelists here, are everybody's kind of sitting in a different place from a security perspective. How do you enrich that data so you really get your full 360 POV, and then being able to make the intelligent, action or response thereafter?
Great, thank you. Rick, how about you? Would you like to join in on this one?
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. It's those routine tasks, those repetitive, high volume things you're doing over and over. I like to use just a quick example of take an abuse mailbox situation where a SOC team's getting something in. They get a report, a message sent in right away. You start going through those things that you're going to do every single time. You're going to parse information out, grab the URLs, attachments, send to a sandbox, add things back to an incident. As you start stepping through all of the actions you do, you start to see those things that don't require a security expertise to do, those are ripe for automation, right? So that's where I think you really get the value, is you step through that workflow, identify those things, and automate from there.
Great point. All right, this one, I'm going to ask Dan to jump in on this. There's many security technologies already in place in most enterprises. We're talking about the large enterprises. How are existing technologies integrated into a SOAR solution?
So, I mean, at a technical low solution or technical, low level, it's all APIs. But the higher level, strategic thinking, you want to. The question of how do you integrate your technologies, think less on the technical way to get the kind of the pipes hooked up, but we recommend that clients that you have to start with a solid foundation of well-defined repeatable processes, and the reason for that is that automated solutions, kind of by the way they're designed, are not ad hoc solutions. So if the work you're doing in your security environment, security teams are, if you're doing things in an ad hoc manner, you're not going to be able to automate that very efficiently. So the first step, the first step is defining your processes and use cases, and then you go and you look at the technologies that are in your environment, and think about how do those play into your those workflows. So some kind of buckets you can put things into, or which tools initiate workflows. So where what's going to kick off an investigation or bring that to the level that an investigation's needed. What tools are providing supporting data during a workflow? So during the course of an investigation, where are your analysts getting data from, getting that context, like Isaac mentioned, where's that coming from? What systems? How are your incidents tracked and routed between teams? So how are you kind of connecting all these things together in a way that can be shared and communicated? And then finally, where does all of this live at the end of the day? So once an investigation is complete, where does all that data go? So thinking about all those different tools and how they fit into those workflows, and then looking at each one and saying, how can I connect this from a technical perspective to my SOAR, my automation tool? And there's a variety of ways of doing that. Most commonly, APIs, and sometimes through email. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Rick. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, great job stepping through that with the different buckets and what to do. One thing I'd be wary of there too is you'll see a lot of things saying, hey, we've got 300 of these integrations out of the box, and this breadth of integrations that That doesn't necessarily mean that those 300 integrations are going to meet that workflow once you go through that exercise. Just be mindful that, there's a lot of situations where it might just be surface level, or it's going to be missing data that you need. It's not going to be taking the actions that make sense for what you're trying to do. So I would just say, look past that a little bit. Like, yes, to your point, it comes down to APIs, and a lot of this time it's going to, when you actually do integrate them together, it's going to be custom code at some level. And also look for vendors with deeper integrations, deeper partnerships is another thing I would say. Pressure your vendors back.
Good point. All right, we're going to bring this one to Nathan now. Nathan, one impediment to the adoption of SOAR products is that it requires a talented team to integrate it, like we just talked about, with whatever technology you already have. So how do you train your existing in-house expertise to effectively use these tools?
I think there's a couple of different pieces to consider, and Dan, I appreciate very much that you talked both about the technical pieces of it from an API standpoint and from process, because those are really kind of the two key pieces that I think a lot of organizations, they usually miss one or the other. And so when you're talking about training your workforce to support these types of solutions or implement them, from a technical standpoint, you do need to have someone who understands APIs, who's comfortable in Python, who can write scripts, who can make the customization work. And frankly, in a lot of cases, some security teams, and I mean, I'm guilty of this myself, we're not coders, right? Even from a scripting perspective, you have a lot of security folks out there who understand risk, who understand process. They don't necessarily know how to write code. So, it's a big benefit there if you have people like that on your team. If not, train them or help them get there. It's an invaluable skill anyway, even outside of SOAR. But having the technical know-how in the team to be able to make those changes on the fly, to make API adjustments, to Rick's point, vendors make changes to their APIs all the time, and you need to keep those workflows going. Being able to make the change on the fly is really critical for your continued implementation effort. On the flip side of that, though, talking about the process, I think the other consideration you've got to make sure as a security team, you need to have really well in hand is a really, really strong partnership with the business units in your organization to understand not just how you deal with incident response, how your processes work on the security team. How does the company handle incident response? Who needs to be notified globally? Does the executive team need to be notified? Does HR need to be notified? Do you need to pull a broader team together? And making sure that you have that expertise on the team, even down to your analyst and engineer levels, I would advocate for this. Maybe some of the panelists might disagree here, but I think it's important for even those folks to understand the business processes of what's going on, so that as you're building out the workflows in your source solution, how it's going to respond, what pieces do I automate, you're not just automating the security portion, you're really automating the entire business portion of it, so that anyone who's involved in the risk management function is part of the automation process, and they see the benefit of it, they get the resultant, notifications, that type of thing. So
sounds like time for a tabletop exercise.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, but doing that homework to align with all of their business partners, and then teaching your staff how it all works, making sure you're on top of that. It's a lot of work, but I mean, it's a key piece of success in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Dave, do you want to chime in at all on that?
Well, I mean, definitely, if you have a security team that, yes, they may not be ready to handle one particular aspect of things, but they are trainable. They are, we have opposable thumbs. We're not good with change, but in a security field, change is inevitable. So being able to adapt and, handle protecting the workforce, the workplace, and the workload is essential. And I mean, just to echo what everyone has been saying here, defined repeatable processes are absolutely essential in order to reduce the risk within your organization. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, thank you. Isaac, I'm going to throw a question your way now.
If I can I just add one last part to both what Nathan and Dave were saying is, I think it's absolutely, you have to approach any form of automation. It touches multiple parts of every business, right? So as you really look at your strategy, you're not looking at necessarily like precise means to an end you are, but you really have to look at what is the greater impact across the entirety of that life cycle. One of the biggest advantages, I think, with you know, an automation strategy is being able to continuously break down barriers that exist from siloed teams. You have infrastructure, you have security, we have network, like cloud, right? You have all these different teams that fall under the same or even separate umbrellas depending on the organization, and being able to get that level of business buy-in, but also being able to really look at what are your initiating requirements, so that as you continue to move forward in that process, it's not just the level of you know, scripting and API expertise, whether it's a vendor or in-house, but also really being able to look at what are the requirements for the business as we kind of go back to absolutely defining where those repeatable processes are, but also where's the benefit, and are we certain of where we want to continue to automate, and then obviously what that impact is. I think great points, right, from Nathan and Dave.
All right, thank you. Rick, I'll be with you in a minute, but I want to stick with Isaac here. With the shift towards automation and machine learning, what impact does this have on your workforce? There's a lot of layers there.
There's a lot of layers. I think there's also a lot of loaded questions that come with, you know, anytime we start talking about ML, AI, and even automation, right? There's a level of competence that is assumed and then dismissed, right? And I think that's generally because there's not really that governing body, right? And as I think that as we continue to evolve what we can do from a machine learning approach, advanced intelligence, right? What we're actually seeing is hopefully an impact that brings greater amounts of data to our analysts, to our workforce, that enables them to make quicker, better, and more informed decisions, and better define what those next steps are, right? So it really helps to eliminate some of the minutia and really some of like the just overburdening and exhaustion that I think occurs with so many that exist within the, you know, security space. Really, again, being able to like leverage those platforms, not as you know, not as a replacement for what it is that the workforce is doing, but being able to up level what our workforce is able to do with those technologies at their fingertips.
Good point. Good point. Nathan, what do you feel about that question?
Well, I actually want to take Isaac's comment one step further, I think, because it is a very loaded question, and I hear this from, you know, CIOs and CISOs quite often about the concern that you know, automation is seen as something that just replaces staff, that they're just out to, you know, robot people out of a job essentially, and it's simply not true, obviously. But I think if you're in a management situation, if you're leading a team, it's important to position this, I think, in a really positive manner, because it does, to Isaac's point, it up-levels existing capabilities of what the team can do. But I would take it a step further and say it actually, for most security teams, it actually gives you the opportunity to get your people back to doing the things that they're best at doing and that they weren't really doing before. I mean, the number of times I talk to people who have highly trained penetration testers, we'll say, web application gurus, and they're still running spreadsheets about missing patches every month and trying to help their teams, you know, remediate basic functions. Well, I mean, I would like to have that pen tester do pen testing. Like, that's what they like to do. That's what they're good at. You're paying them a lot of money to be, you know, to deliver that expertise to your organization. So, you know, the amount of benefit that automation brings in terms of, you know, being kind of a force multiplier for your existing staff is awesome. But if you can automate some of those basic things that we've gotten stuck into routines with, and then free up your people to do the things that are really great, you're going to have much better employee loyalty, you're going to have happier employees, and you're going to get a lot more done on your security team, because you're finally getting back to the stuff that you hired them to do in the first place.
It sounds like a lot of that is really just how you approach it and how the management talks about it. Dan, did you want to jump in here too?
Yeah, just kind of, you know, excellent points all around. There's an analogy we use at Recorded Future. You know, we talk about this concept of kind of a cyber centaur, right? So you've got, you know, the idea that machine learning and automation and all of these new technologies that we're developing to make us better as security teams doesn't replace the analyst. It turbocharges them. And if you think kind of the idea of the centaur, it's this creature that has the strength and power of a horse, but still the reasoning and kind of intuition of a human, and that's where it can force multiply what your teams are doing. It does, as far as impacts to workforce, it does force a shift a little bit in kind of the skills and the way that we kind of think about security. I think security analysts that now have access to all these tools, they become, especially when you start working with machine learning and kind of the kind of big kind of data sciencey things, they have to kind of, your analysts have to kind of become data scientists in a way. They need to be able to understand how to work with this, all of this, these tools and really get the most out of them, because anyone that's worked with machine learning before can probably tell you that they're really powerful, but only when they're trained and applied in the correct way. If you just let it loose in your environment and trust it to work out of the box, you're probably not really solving any solutions for yourself, creating more problems for yourself, actually.
So humans are still going to be needed, is what we're getting here. So Rick, I want, there's still, Rick, if you could just talk about, there's still going to be companies and organizations that are nervous about automating the detecting of security events without any human interaction. We want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And humans are still needed, right? I mean, I see it broken down into a couple buckets. We've got those easy targets for automation that we've already talked about, those repetitive things. But then you also have potentially bad targets for automation, or targets where things that just are more disruptive if you automate. I think like just automating, taking down machines, removing access, changing configurations. Like these are all types of actions that can be very disruptive if just let loose in an environment without that oversight. But that said, if you do focus on that enrichment piece, I like Dan's the super analyst or what you were describing, the centaur. I mean, if you just focus on bringing in that other contextual information, hopefully that individual can take that action from the same platform quickly. So they can get through and say they do need to limit access or take down a machine. So it's that balance. I think organizations are going to see the benefit of automating some of these other tasks as they gain more confidence, and I think you'll still see the efficiency gains kind of stem from there as well. I think we're probably a ways off from just letting loose the automation in an organization, though.
Dave, your thoughts on this?
I mean, when we're looking at the three different buckets of, threat and vulnerability management is one, security incident response is another one, and security operations automation, we really want to tackle of, making sure that we are, providing the understanding with folks that their jobs are not going to be eliminated. Exactly what, to the point of Nathan, Rick, Dan, absolutely, this is going to shift. I remember when cloud computing became the big thing. The gray hair is real. And everybody was like, oh, I'm going to be out of a job. I was like, no, your job is just going to shift ever so slightly to one side, and you will have a different set of responsibilities. And like, for example, when you're dealing with something like as simple as passwords, as simple as that, every time somebody has to do a reset on one, it's going to cost money to that organization. Whatever that happens to be will vary from one, your mileage will vary. But if you add in things like multi-factor authentication, biometrics, passwordless types of technology, to help with that automation, you're reducing the risk, reducing the cost to the organization, and making it easier for people to do exactly what they were hired to do in the first place. I suffered through this at a job years ago where I was hired to be a pen tester and run the entire vulnerability management program. Within 2 weeks, I was a CISO because the CISO got marched out in handcuffs. It was a really interesting time, but I never got to go back to doing what I was doing. But in these days, there are so much opportunity, so many tools that are available that are easy to use, that allow for the democratization of security, that will enable these people to actually get their jobs done and not have to hit the panic button.
So, okay, that's great points. So Nathan, we've established that we still need the humans. So let's talk about attracting and retaining that talent, because I know, we hear all the statistics, there's 3 million job openings in cybersecurity, blah, blah, blah. So what are some of your thoughts on, and how do you source talent?
Well, I don't think anything I could say here is going to be necessarily earth-shattering or revolutionary. I think everybody sort of knows this at this point, but I still find that companies struggle with it, so I guess it still needs to be said. I think there's been a big shift in the last 3 to 5 years or so from an employee standpoint, what people are looking for in a workforce or in their careers. I think there was some allure years ago to the never-ending refrigerators of sodas and the beer Fridays and the foosball tables in the break rooms. I don't know why everyone keeps saying foosball tables. As Silicon Valley must have made created an entire industry of buying those things. But I think that's over and done. I mean, either people are kind of jaded and they expect everyone to have all of those perks, or I think what's true is that people have come to realize as information security as a discipline is maturing, it's now a little less Wild West, that people realize that what matters is, their health and well-being. They want to have more time, a flexible time for their families and whatnot. They want to have, volunteer days supported by their companies. They want to see their companies have a good culture, support charity work, that kind of thing. And so I think the companies who understand that what employees are actually looking for is not the free lunches, but they're looking for a company that supports their health and well-being, that supports their families, that understands that what we do takes a lot of time. We work a lot of hours, and having flexibility to kind of manage your life around that has become a really important thing. And the companies that adopt that are going to be the companies that are successful in attracting some of those folks, especially when the word gets out that that's how they work. But more importantly, about retaining them, because the employee is going to feel valued. They're going to find that environment to be what they want. So, I know it's not a really technical kind of answer, but I mean, I think that culture piece is really important. And if you're looking to hold on to your security folks, focusing more on those kinds of benefits over the free food and beer, which is fine. Keep doing the free food and beer, by the way. My boss is listening right now. I'm on board for that.
I've been in a lot of those buildings though, and there's no one taking the time to play foosball because they're so busy. So it looks
Absolutely
good and everything, but it collects a lot of dust. But do we have a virtual foosball table now? That's the key. Has anybody come up with that app so that we can all work from home and do COVID virtual foosball? So, all right, let's go on to Isaac here. Isaac, in working across different customers and environments, where do you see the greatest benefit in automation? And do you have any examples?
Yeah, so again, kind of, I think it encapsulates a lot of probably what we've kind of discussed already. But the biggest part is ultimately, there's no shortage of information and noise that the customer environments are seeing every day, right? The amount of data that we're looking at and reviewing is only increasing. So being able to use automation as a strategy to refocus on what's going to be most valuable and most important to those customers, right? So a lot of what we're doing, at least from ReliaQuest, is looking at a strategy where we're continuing to build on their existing infrastructure, but then how do we leverage the automation lifecycle, right? And I think we try and go away from SOAR, because that R is the hard pronunciation, and really look into what is the evolution of where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. Same thing, we're not looking to replace or even augment. We are looking to get better outcomes. And as we've done that, we're now looking into a strategy that says, as you start looking at, how is your model integrated? What is the importance of all of the data interconnectivity that our customers have, and them actually being able to now realize out of my proof points, out of my recorded futures, out of everything that I'm using in my environment, I can now see really a global TCO decrease, and all of a sudden I'm seeing my the ROI actually increase, because I'm able to realize where that value is in the greater scheme of things.
That takes us right into the next question for Rick. So what are some of the key benefits that organizations are seeing with SOAR?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've, again, touched on the whole idea of taking that good analyst and empowering that good analyst, allowing them to be more efficient, more effective. And there's a ton of value there, right? I've worked with hundreds of organizations that see that time savings and that efficiency gain. But one other interesting benefit that I have seen that we haven't really talked about is you both have that idea of putting all the information in that place for that one analyst. You also have a very useful system where you're essentially creating guardrails around, say, a more junior analyst. So as you build out these workflows, as you identify these things that need to be automated, as you identify the decision points of what happens next, I've seen a lot of organizations be able to take somebody that does not have quite the depth of cybersecurity experience and be able to get a lot back out of that person as well as they go through that path of events and make those decisions, and can be very efficient at doing various jobs for an organization. So, I mean, you combine those two things together. I mean, you've got a ton of time savings, which time is expensive. You've got the efficiency, but also flat out, you've got the effectiveness in the improving of your overall security posture for your organization, because you can spend the time on the harder things, especially with your key talent.
Nathan, you want to jump in there too?
Yeah, I think one of the other benefits that we can see from SOAR implementations, and I'm going to go back to something Dave said a little bit earlier, but you know, I think there's a lot of organizations that expect to implement SOAR and have it be a silver bullet to just solve all their problems. And they hear the automation piece and they just think, oh, it's automation. It's magic. It will just figure it out all for me and I don't have to do anything. And obviously that is not true. And I think one of the key benefits is when you're implementing something like this, not only does it force you to step back a little bit and have to look at your organization from like, what are my policies and procedures? Do I really understand what happens today? Do I really know what my workflows are? To Dave's point, I mean, you have to know those things. But then once you have it, it also can establish a baseline for you. Right? If you don't already know today what your baseline looks like, if you don't know what your workflows are, okay, I mean, it's not a great starting point, but if you use the tool to at least understand some of the baseline stuff, then you can make better decisions to move into the full automation kind of piece of it, to get into that response part. So I think that if you're looking, again, don't jump all the way into turn on the AI and automate the world. You know, baseline, like really use it to step back if you need to. It's okay to have that sort of, you know, phase 0.5. Before you go forward with it, but use that tool to understand the lay of the land, both from your environment and from a workflow and process perspective. Because once you have that, all your decisions after that are going to be so much better, and you're going to be able to take the value that you need from that platform.
So I'm hearing it's a lot about the implementation. So Dan, are there some ideas you have that you've seen, some implementation concerns that some companies have had?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously a lot of challenges for adopting any new technology. I think the two biggest challenges we've seen, you know, with our clients is, you know, one is developing the workflows, so knowing what you want to accomplish with the tool before you stand it up, and then the other piece is, you know, making sure you select the correct tool for your team and what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah, those established repeatable workflows are really a necessary foundation for getting any automation to work properly. And going back to my previous, you know, what I said before, you know, ad hoc processes, they're just not going to translate to automated tools very well. And then as far as, you know, matching to your team skills, you know, some of these solutions are very technical. I mean, going back to the kind of the need for development scripting skills on your teams, some SOAR solutions, you know, requires a lot of expertise to get them to work correctly, and there's others that are more plug and play. You may lose some flexibility, but they're a little simpler to stand up. So there's being honest with the capabilities on your team, or at least being honest with what you're able to get for, you know, kind of skill sets, you know, to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success with those tools.
And I think that leads into a question for Dave here. So how can you improve security via democratizing the tools, and how can Zero Trust actually improve the security of the workplace and the workload and the workforce?
Okay, well, first off, on the tool front, if we can make tools that are easy for people to use, then they're going to be a absolute addition to the security posture of any organization, and ultimately by extension, other organizations out on the internet. When you have a tool that's written by engineers for engineers, you can't expect somebody in finance to be able to leverage it accordingly. So we want to make sure that we're doing this. Like, my mother can use Duo Security on her computer at home, but don't get me wrong, I love PGP, but I would never try to get her to use it. It's just, we have to make sure the tools are accessible, because yes, while we are technical and while we've been doing it since, in my case, since '83, we have to make sure that we are providing people the tools that help do it in a safe and secure manner, because they want to concentrate on their jobs. They want to concentrate on their functions. They don't want to have to worry about, do I have a 500 long character password or something, nonsensical like that. We need to make it easier for them to get their jobs done in a safe and secure manner. So that's from that aspect of things. From a zero trust perspective, it is about talking about reducing the risk. And I think it was Dan that was talking about, making sure you have your requirements before you talk to a vendor. That's absolutely spot on. You need to make sure that you do the research rather within your organization, looking through what kind of user accounts you have, what kind of APIs you have in your organization, applications, all of these things. Once you have those inventories, then you go talk to a vendor. Because, yes, we are here to sell you solutions, but we also want to make sure that you are a partner for life. Because if we just sell you a box, drop it on the front porch and take off, that's not a positive in any way, shape, or form. So zero trust security is about reducing risk, and you have to look at it as a framework as opposed to an end state, which unfortunately we'll never get to, but we will iterate towards reducing that risk.
Isaac, did you want to jump in there at all?
No, great point, right? As you look at, the solution, right? I mean, that's really what we're all about. It's, I don't think anybody wants to just sling some software and then take off. The goal is even above and beyond the customer for life. It's, let's make sure we have a targeted approach and we're resolving specific issue or group of issues, instead of just saying, I think this will work and let's build after the fact. It's just,
great point.
It's a great point, right? I mean, my head nods in every direction there.
Yeah, that's great. Nathan, so, we're talking about all this automation, and so there are going to be some threats that are going to be automatically addressed and some that need more hands-on attention. How do you decide between the two when you're working with all this new automation?
Look to where your Excel spreadsheets are in your environment. I say that to some extent.
That's simple, right?
Thank you, Dave, for laughing. I appreciate that a ton. I look, from a vulnerability management and threat intelligence and threat hunting perspective, I still think this is one of the bigger challenges in a lot of ways. Is just trying to figure out what's important, right? Like, where do I start? Where do I begin? How do I know what to do? And I think for a long time, what we've seen is people have just tried to boil the ocean, right? It's, you get a list of patches every month. You say, like, I don't even want to pay. I'm not going to pay attention to the threats out there. I just know that I've got a laundry list of work to do. And I'm going to do it all. And hopefully I cover what I need to cover. And I've limited my threats and that sort of thing. And it's a little bit of a problem, because I mean, this is where we get into Excel spreadsheets, why analysts are sitting there every month with their reports, trying to figure out what to do and what threats to address. So I think, philosophically, there's two areas you want to look at when you're trying to decide what to automate, what not to automate. And it comes, again, back to baselining. It comes back to understanding your environment to some extent. You need to understand, what your asset scope looks like. What's critical? What's important in your environment? Are there places where if the automation does too much or goes a little awry, does it matter as much? Maybe not. If you take down the CEO's laptop, probably a bigger problem. So, you want to look at the baseline of understanding the environment. Where's critical? Where's not critical? What do I need to have, deal with? What can I wait on? Because that gives you then the next piece, which is using smart threat intelligence to prioritize, right? Understand, don't feel like you have to shoulder this yourself. Like, figure out what the threat landscape looks like. Some vulnerabilities are way more critical than others. Some have live exploits in the wild. Some of them, there's, active talk on the dark web about, exploit kits being sold and whatnot. And so it's a dynamic kind of thing. It changes. And the places where there's more active things happening and you want to be able to respond quickly, if you can empower your SOAR solution to understand the prioritization of those threats and those vulnerabilities from an intelligence standpoint, you can act on them more quickly. You can automate and address that. But you can't do that without that base understanding, right? You can't do it without knowing these assets I can never automate on because they're too critical or they're too sensitive or whatever the case is. And then feed in that extra information, because that's where you're going to be able to then focus your people on the stuff that can't be automated. I mean, that's, I think the third part of that is once you've automated the really critical stuff, put the human brain to work on the hard problems, the application security problems, all the things that require a little bit more of a fuzzing approach, if you will, that maybe either for comfort levels or just because it requires the assistance, it needs that human brain engaged to fix.
And that leads into a question for you, Dan. So do you have any best practices for the humans to incorporate their threat intelligence into the SOAR workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. That's bread and butter what we do at Recorded Future. So, talking about SOAR specifically, I tend to, it's the way you apply threat intelligence there is, it's kind of an extension of how you're using historically or typically using threat intelligence in other tools like your SIM. A lot of other tools, threat intelligence is used in a correlative way. So you're saying, here's a big pile of data and what in this data should I be concerned about? Once it gets to your SOAR, and so you start kind of, it's much more looking at that context. And so, it's more of an enrichment use case for threat intelligence. And, kind of again, going back to kind of those defined workflows, it's helpful up front to know what are your sources, what is the intelligence you want to bring in to a given kind of type of incident or workflow. If you're doing something with vulnerabilities, you absolutely need to look at what's recent context of recent exploitation and association with exploit kits and things like that. If you're working a phishing incident, you need to be able to automatically pull in all of the kind of domain intelligence and other things that you can to sort of make sense of the artifacts you have associated with that. And so your SOAR tools are very good at automating all of that, pulling all that data in before it even gets in front of an analyst. So the first time an analyst looks at it, they already have the full context for the artifacts that they're looking at.
Great, thanks. Let's bring in Rick on this topic also.
Yeah, and great point. As pulling the intelligence in, you use the example of like a phishing incident, and I think that's a great one, right? You can leverage those IOCs that those reputation lists, the sandbox findings, all around this incident, and from there, I would even say, depending on the quality of the threat intelligence, you could automate actions such as, hey, quarantine these messages from the end user's mailbox, go find other copies of this message ID, go search for this threat everywhere else. Let's call the EWS or Graph API and pull all of these messages back. So leveraging that threat intelligence, but also that confidence behind the quality of the threat intelligence can really spur actions that you can automate from there.
Great discussion. Thank you, everybody. So we're getting ready to wrap up slowly. I want to remind everybody that even when we're done wrapping up here, you can go visit everybody at their booth. So please, make sure you take advantage of that and ask more deep dive questions. I wish we had another hour, but what I'm going to ask is each one of you, I'll call on you and ask you to just sort of wrap up and, what's your one piece of wisdom on this topic that you can leave folks with that you really want to make sure that they heard from today? And we'll start with Isaac.
I think it's just identify the opportunities, build out those requirements, and focus on the entirety of the life cycle that automation can really provide the organization, not just being able to action on a laptop during off hours.
Great. And Dave, what would you like to leave us with?
Well, when you're looking at your automation and you're looking at protecting your workload, workforce, and workplace, you want to make sure that you understand that we as vendors are here to help you in your journey, but you have to do your homework before you ever talk to any of us. We are more than willing to help, but you got to know what you're trying to protect.
Great point. And Rick?
yeah, identify the opportunities, but yeah, don't shy away from automation either. It can get complicated, it can get in depth, but we are here to support those use cases and to work as partners. Yeah.
Thank you. And Nathan.
Yeah, I get it. I'm going to go back to my earlier point of just remember the business. Information security at the end of the day is not a technical discipline. We're a risk management discipline. And so using this function to manage and mitigate risk means you've got to get the business involved, HR, legal, your business teams, management, like all of that. So be sure in your process, you don't just focus on the technical, get the business involved, make it a very, for lack of a better term, holistic approach to how you deal with SOAR in your business.
Yeah, just as security is not just the IT team's issue, it is a business issue, risk management,
Absolutely.
company-wide, same thing here. You gotta have everybody at the table. And Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of echoing what everyone else has said, but I think the biggest thing is just be deliberate with how you're adopting new technologies. To borrow from something we used to say in the Army, the whole slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So if you approach it in a deliberate, methodical way, you're much more likely to have success and save your business dollars in the end. So.
Great. And when you get a call from your aunt who's been a victim of a romance scam, that's where we come in. Send them to fraudsupport.org and we will help them out. Thank you so much, everybody, for this great conversation. And I encourage everybody listening to go and check out the booths and ask some more questions. Thank you so much for being with us today.